What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today's reaction video is how America became a superpower. We've done a lot of American reactions obviously on the channel. Yeah. Don't worry, if you're from Canada or Mexico, which is very random, we will be getting around to you like loads of places we have on the list, don't we? It's just these videos are getting suggestions to us. We enjoy doing them, or at least I enjoy them. Do you enjoy doing them? We do speak off camera, but I don't want to speak for you. We enjoy doing them, and this is a pretty cool one, how America became a superpower. Let us know in the comments if you want us to keep checking stuff like this out. Like I say, we've done those different videos, so we kind of have a bit of an idea. You haven't seen like the Civil War and stuff like that, so it may touch upon that a little bit. So was it the history of the United States?
Yes.
Yes, it was, but that was rapid. Yeah, that was like, couldn't even take it in. So maybe this will be a little bit more. It's going to talk about military a bit more as well, isn't it, and stuff like that. So smash that like button if you enjoy this kind of content. Smash that subscribe button as well. And I have waffled randomly. I didn't expect to say anything like that, to be honest. I just started talking, which I know Millie's not always the biggest fan of. You guys aren't always the biggest fan of.
It's not that I'm not a fan of it. It's just when you say, let's get into it, and then you just talk for 4 hours.
Yeah, I can't help it. But enough said, let's get straight into it. Smash the like button, guys, smash the subscribe button. How America became a superpower. I'm just plugging. Let's go.
The modern United States is the most powerful country in human history, with over 800 military bases and 37% of global military spending. The US has become the leader of a vast, interconnected global system that has helped usher in an era of unprecedented prosperity and low levels of conflict. To understand America's position in the world, and why it's so pivotal for world politics as we know it, you have to go back to the country's founding, back to when America wasn't a global power in any sense of the word. During the first 70 years of its existence, the United States expanded in both territory and influence in North America, eventually reaching the Pacific Ocean, in a wave of expansionism that resulted in the wholesale slaughter of the indigenous people who populated the continent. But early Americans were deeply divided as to whether the country should expand beyond the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. This became a major debate after the Civil War, when some leaders, like post-war Secretary of State Seward, argued that America should push to become a global power. Seward succeeded in pushing a plan to purchase Alaska from Russia, but his attempts to buy Greenland and Iceland, as well as annexed...
It may come up in a previous video. I didn't realise Alaska was only... I didn't realise Russia had Alaska.
It makes sense because of how close they are.
Yeah, because that little point is so close. I didn't realise they may only got it in 1867. It seems quite recent. I'd have assumed... If anyone missed that, I just spilled coke down herself. That just threw me off. Well, yeah, it was just surprising to me. Are you alright?
Can you give me them grey...
What? Grey shorts, just see if it blends in. What? This is what happens on the beaches. It's not the highest quality, but have a good time.
Territory in the Caribbean were all blocked by Congress. That's because some Americans, including many on Capitol Hill, had a strong anti-imperialist bent. These people worried about America getting more involved in global politics, as well as having to integrate populations from quote-unquote inferior races.
Oh, baby,
and this opposition implied major checks on the imperialist urge to expand. But something was happening in the late 1800s that would change the debate about American expansionism. The Industrial Revolution produced explosive economic growth, and the bigger US economy required a more centralized state and bureaucracy to manage the growing economy. Power became concentrated in the federal government, making it easier for expansionist presidents, like William McKinley, to unilaterally push American influence abroad. The key turning point came in 1898, when President McKinley dragged the country into war with Spain over Cuba, despite some intense domestic opposition. The rising United States easily defeated the moribund Spanish Empire, acquiring Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines in the process. Over the next 2 years, the US would annex the Kingdom of Hawaii, Wake Island, and American Samoa. A few years later, the US took control of the Panama Canal Zone and sent troops to occupy the Dominican Republic. It also purchased the American Virgin Islands. This period of rapid acquisition of far-flung territories put the US on the map as a truly global power. During this time, America also began using its influence to protect its growing commercial and military interests abroad, installing pro-American regimes in places like Nicaragua, and playing a major role in international diplomacy regarding the Western presence in China. World War I showed just how much America's influence had grown. Not only was American intervention a decisive factor in the war's end, but President Wilson attended the Paris Peace Conference, which ended the war, and attempted to set the terms of the peace. He spearheaded America's most ambitious foreign policy initiative yet, an international organization called the League of Nations, designed to promote peace and cooperation globally. The League, a wholesale effort to remake global politics, showed just how ambitious American foreign policy had become. Yet isolationism was still a major force in the United States.
Congress
Congress blocked the United States from joining the League of Nations, dooming Wilson's project. During the Great Depression and the rise of Hitler, the US was much more focused on its own region than on European affairs. Ultimately, America's ever-growing entanglements abroad made it impossible for it to stay out of global affairs entirely. In East Asia, the growing Japanese Empire posed a direct threat to American possessions and troops, bringing the United States and Japan into conflict. This culminated in the Pearl Harbor attack, bringing the United States into World War II. World War II would transform America's global presence forever. The United States was the only major power to avoid economic ruin during the war.
Oh, wow.
And it was the sole country equipped with atomic weapons. As such, it was in a unique position to set the terms of the peace, and, with the aim of preventing another war in mind, it took advantage. The most famous example of this is the creation of the United Nations. The UN Charter set up a system of international law prohibiting wars of conquest, like the ones waged by the Nazis and the Japanese. It also served as a forum in which the international community could weigh in on disputes and help resolve them. This way, the Americans hoped, great powers could resolve their differences through compromise and law rather than war. But while the UN is the most famous of the post-war institutions, it isn't the only one. 730 delegates from all 44 allied nations came together in a small vacation haven in New Hampshire. Their goal? To establish a global financial system that would prevent another Great Depression and World War. The resulting agreement, called the Bretton Woods Agreement, ultimately became the backbone of the global financial system, resulting in the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. By creating these institutions, the United States committed itself to being deeply involved in the world's problems. The issue, though, is that the world's second largest power, the Soviet Union, saw things differently. World War II had made allies out of the democratic West and communist East in the fight against Hitler, but that couldn't last. The United States saw Soviet expansion in Eastern Europe and elsewhere as a direct threat to its vision of a free-trading, democratic world.
I'm just going to pause it just because you realise again how big Russia actually is.
Yeah.
It is absolutely massive. Like, the US is massive, but when you look at Russia, like, that is so, so big. Obviously, we don't like Russia. But
Jersey's not even on there.
Yeah, Jersey, Russia. It's I bet it is. I bet it's about there. If you can see my mouse on the screen, it is about there, Jersey. That's where we are currently, but it's pretty minuscule, isn't it?
Pathetic.
To a substantial degree, in one form or another, socialism has spread the shadow of human regimentation over most of the nations of the earth, and the shadow is encroaching upon our own liberty.
Fearful of Soviet intentions towards Western Europe, the US and other European nations created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, a military alliance meant to stop Russia from invading other countries in Europe. Globally, the US committed to a strategy called containment, so called because it was aimed at containing the spread of communism everywhere on the globe. This new global struggle meant that the US had to exert influence everywhere, all the time. Instead of disbanding the massive military machine created for World War II, the wheels mostly kept turning. This had two main results. First, the US was pulled into unlikely alliances with countries like Saudi Arabia, Israel, and South Korea, seeing each of them as bulwarks against communist influence in their region. Secondly, the US began intervening, often secretly, in dozens of countries to contain Soviet influence. Sometimes this meant propping up sympathetic dictators, like in Iran. Other times, it meant supplying rebels with arms and money, like in Afghanistan in 1979 and Nicaragua in 1985. Over the course of the Cold War, the US intervened in hundreds of disputes around the globe, ending up with a complicated set of alliances, tensions, and relationships in basically every corner of the earth.
Pretty much connected to everyone somehow. Except Russia.
After the Berlin Wall fell, the US could have withdrawn from the system, severing ties with its allies and drawing down the size of its military. And while the US did decrease military spending, much of the military infrastructure and alliances from the Cold War remained. Presidents George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton decided that it was in both America and the world's interests for the United States, now the sole superpower on Earth, to continue actively managing global affairs.
We should be and we must be peacemakers.
NATO, created solely as a tool for countering the Soviet Union, stayed together and even expanded, a way of keeping European nations united in the absence of the Soviet threat.
Still expanding to this day.
Washington's support for countries like Israel and Japan stayed intact, ostensibly as a means of preventing war in their respective regions. The global system of alliances and institutions created to keep the peace during the Cold War became permanent, as did the American military and political commitments necessary to keep them running. This system remains in operation today, and no leading American politician since the Cold War has seriously called for dismantling it. Except, perhaps, for Donald Trump. Trump has said contradictory things about these commitments, but he's consistently argued that American allies are not paying the US enough for its protection, and questioned the value of free trade. That calls NATO and even the World Trade Organization into question.
At some point, we have to say, you know what? We're better off if Japan protects itself against this maniac in North Korea. We're better off, frankly, if South Korea is going to start to protect itself.
Saudi Arabia, nuclear weapons?
Saudi Arabia, absolutely.
This is a sharp divergence from the consensus that has dominated US foreign policy since 1945, and something closer to the isolationism that came before it. So will President Trump act on some of candidate Trump's ideas and reverse decades worth of institution building and alliances? We'll find out soon enough.
Oh, the answer to that was no. He didn't go back on it because 2017 this one was done. I found that super interesting.
That was probably one of the interesting ones.
Yeah, because it wasn't just kind of, oh, this happened by the way.
It was
what?
like information thrown at you. It was like explained
stage by stage of how they started making these relationships, what caused the relationship, Great Depression coming in there, then the war and stuff like that, and how they just built friendships and stuff like that, and then how potentially Trump wanted to get rid of it. That is a tough argument. I don't want people talking in the comments because it could be classed as politics, and we know we stay away from politics on here, but it is a very interesting argument, isn't it? It's kind of one of them, do you want to help your friends, allies, never even met them potentially? Do you feel like you've got a duty to do that?
Yeah. Because
you're allies and you had an agreement? Or do you think we've got to look after number one? You know what I mean? It is a very tough one. If you want to let us know your opinions in the comments, please do, but no fighting, no arguing. We're a family channel on here, aren't we? Even though it's just me and me, obviously,
we're not made for
and
kids
you
either.
legends as well. We're not made for kids, but in the
we just don't want arguing.
No arguing, guys. All happy days and love in the comments. Smash that like button if you enjoyed it. Smash that subscribe button. Let us know if there's any subjects in there you want us to take a digger deep in.
Dig deeper
bigger,
into.
Dive into it. Yeah. Oh, we did a 10-mile walk this morning, didn't we?
And but I'm fine.
Yeah, but I only had like 5 hours sleep. You were asleep way before me.
It was not.
Smash the like button, guys. Smash the subscribe button. And what's your view?
Have a fantastic day.
And we'll see you legends in the next one. Peace.